Hey, today I'm going to show you a little bit about how to edit using Adobe Lightroom. First thing that we're going to do is click right here and we are going to add photographs. I'm going to add this photograph, which I've saved to my desktop. And then I'm going to click here. I can select all my photographs and click on one box and it will select all of them and then click add one photograph. Now the photograph has been recently added and just now, but the thing is that I like to organize all of my files into folders or albums right here. And I think that that's really important to keep your work organized. So all we're going to do is click here and you go create album. And then if, for example, we were doing a nature photography assignment, then you would create a folder for that, an album for that. For this one, I'm going to drag it into my edits folder. And now I'm going to double click on that. And these are all photographs that I'm going to use for demonstrating edits. So here we have a photograph that I got in a Paris metro station. And there are some things, this is a raw file, so definitely edits need to be done. Here I'm going to click on edit. First thing that I have to do is straighten my image. So I'm going to click here. Now I can use this slider just to straighten it. I want it to look like the people are actually standing up straight, and I think that that's a lot better. Okay, so this actually remembered my last ones. I'm going to reset my edits. I'm going to go back and do that one again. Okay, here we go. That's probably fine. A good thing to do whenever you're learning editing is to take each slider and to drag it up to the left and drag it to the right and try to figure out what you think would look good and what each slider does. Okay, so I think it needs a bit of contrast, but I'm going to create more contrast after. Highlight shadows, whites, and blacks. If I make sure that I can see my point curve at this time, I can see that I have blacks and I have some highlights, okay? So I'm going to bring my highlights down and see what happens. And then I'm going to bring it to the right and see what happens. It's way too high. But if I didn't know where to go, I'm going to hold down Option. And then I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of clipping happening. And right now it shows me where it's clipping. I think a little bit in this instance is probably fine because they're lights and they're not, you know, it's not like the sky or anything. So I think that it's going to be fine. For the shadows, let's hold down Option and click. And if I want to have more detail right there, which is in his bag, then I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Okay, same thing with the blacks. Okay, so here I have a lot of blacks. I can't leave it like that. I need to bring that up and I'm going to leave it about here. This is my point curve. If I bring up the whites, so you know that these are the blacks, the shadows, the whites, and the highlights. And if I bring up my curve right here, it's going to brighten everything, okay? And I'm going to create a little bit of an S curve. Actually, just if I bring it down here, you can see that it's going to darken everything. But I'm going to leave one point right here, and this is the way I'm going to create contrast. I'm going to create another point down here, which means that what I'm doing is that I'm adding whites, making that brighter. And here are my shadows. I'm bringing that down and I'm going to make that a bit darker. But I do think that that's too much. So I'm going to bring up my shadows a little bit. And really the way that you do this, it all depends on the actual photograph. Here I'm going to look at my red channel. So I could add red or take away, and that means that I'm kind of adding green. Same thing with the green channel. Okay, here's magenta. And then I have the blue channel, so I can add blue or I can take away blue, okay, which is basically adding yellow. All right, the white balance is very important, which is our color temperature. And so basically I say that when you're moving this, you want to make sure that you keep your whites looking white. You're not adding more color or taking away from it. Same thing with your tint. So I think that the white balance in this image is fine. I'm going to play around with my color afterwards. The vibrance, so I can take down the vibrance or I can bring up the vibrance. And same with the saturation. Now just be careful, we're not going to do our black and white edits this way. So I might bring up my saturation a little bit, okay? Actually, I might bring down my vibrance. All right, so here I can look at each color. So here, if I wanted to play with the yellows a little bit, I'm going to click on the yellow channel. And then I'm going to increase or decrease my saturation. I'm going to increase it a little bit. And that way is better than doing the saturation, because if I just bumped up that saturation, now you can see his arm and his skin and everything, and that's not going to be, it's not going to look good. I'm going to double click on it and bring it back to 0, or I could bring it maybe +3 or 4. So I can play around with these other colors here too. There's like a little bit of a teal happening in the Metro. Let's see if it is actually teal, and no, it's not, because I brought my saturation all the way up and it didn't show up. So maybe it's green. Let's see if it's going to show up. Yeah, it showed up as green. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit more. Color grading is fun. You can add a color to your shadows. I'm going to add a lot right here, just to show you. And then I'm going to add a color to the highlights. Now, I can change this. I can change the darkness or the brightness of that color. And the same thing right here. So if you want to do some color grading, you can do that. And if you want to add color to your midtones or whatever, you can have fun with that. I'm going to bring that back a bit, and this one back a bit, so it's just very light. I can even change my balance of these. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Right here, I can add texture, or I could take away texture. I can add clarity or take it away, but you can see right here that now my edges are very, very soft. So probably don't do it too much in either direction. Dehaze, if you're shooting into the sun and you needed to get rid of some of the haze in your photograph, you could do that. And a vignette is when you add a white or a black, and I know that you can't see the black very well here, but kind of like a circle around your photograph to make your subject stand out. But again, be careful not to overdo it. Sharpening, you're going to add a little bit of sharpening. What I like to do with almost every photograph is to add some noise reduction or luminance. So I would probably recommend with starting off with about 20. Depending on your photograph, if it has a lot of noise, then you're going to add more. And then you can play around with a few of the other things like your geometry, for example. We're not going to go into that right now. We've talked a little bit about the crop, and the healing mask we're also going to do in Photoshop. It's way more effective than in Lightroom. But if you want, you can create a mask, a brush, and we'll probably go over that later on. But that creates adjustments for one part of the image using a gradient, which is quite interesting. I prefer probably doing this in Photoshop, but you can certainly do it in Lightroom. To export your image at the end, you're going to click on that arrow going up and you're going to say export large. If you export the original, that's the original without any edits done. Okay, so go export large, and that's it. Basically, if you go back here, if you want to do a black and white, you can just click on black and white, and then you have all of these already done. You may wish to adjust them, and you may wish also to play with your sliders a little bit. Like we know that there are a lot of yellows here, so I'm going to click on yellow and look at what happens to the yellow parts of the image. We'll go over this a little bit more later on. Okay, so that's basically how you are going to use Lightroom.